Welcome back to the Air Crown Crypto channel. Wishing you a happy and healthy start to this nice little later Saturday morning over here from Helsinki, Finland. Plenty to talk about today as we follow up on the major signals that were concluded upon yesterday for the weekly closure for CME and the major ones to come in the next 48 hours as well. So with all of that in mind, this is really going to be a setup and a continuation of the thread of analysis that we've been putting out here for the past week into the next few weeks to come into, well, I suspect middle to end of February. Anyways, with that in mind, wish you the best as always, and let's get into it right now. By the way, big announcement with the Crown Trading application, which of course you can find for free in the link in the description below at app.crowntrading.net, is the portfolio over here, of which you can now track your portfolio given whatever the hell you want to look at in this tab over here, and you will have a lot of different options with this. I'll briefly give you a little bit of a rundown on how to do it. It's quite simple. You just hit the add transaction right here. You pick whatever pair that you're looking at in this tab. You pick whatever date that you actually bought or sold at in this tab, and then the size right here, and then save that, and it'll add it to its nice little list. You can put it whatever you want. I can make this 20 Bitcoin. I can make it a 2 million Bitcoin, or maybe not, but or I could be Michael Saylor and just track his portfolio with 125,000 Bitcoin. Think about that for a second, by the way. Every time Bitcoin goes up 10 or down 10, he makes or loses $1 million, theoretically on PNL, obviously. Anyways, or it's not theoretically, I mean, that is real, obviously, but it's just P&L. All right, sweet. So let's get into it right now. I do want to start off today with the dashboard here because this is still the most important and pertinent information that is going to play into the analysis to come. So ultimately, we did see global open interest come down significantly since our current all-time high at $69,000. Great number right there. Now coming down all the way to the mid $30,000 territory right here. And whilst it is starting to find its footing, I still do think that this is a good cautionary signal for the long term. Short term, does this allow for a bit of a relief rally? I do think so, yes. I'm sticking with what we've been looking at for the past week here as we validated those signals. Now we're looking for the next set to validate, but that is the main ideas for what I'm looking at right now. Ultimately, long term, I would suspect that this does reset at a region between our September lows and the summer lows right here in May, which would put it at a at a number somewhere between about 5.5 billion and about 8.5 billion in this case. I do have a nice alert over here in the alert section, which by the way you can do as well, and that's where I'm essentially looking for on a major, potentially even macro low. Until that happens, I do still think that this asset is still maybe long-term risky, but that doesn't mean that Bitcoin can't trade up, 10, maybe even 20% off the current lows. On top of that, if we go over here and check out the funny rates, we are starting to get our first indications of positive rates, but I want to focus on the past week or so of price action because it's been consistently negative, meaning that if you are holding a short position, you are paying for that position. Not a whole hell of a lot, to be fair, but again, that in line with current price action does align with, more likely a short covering rally at minimum, or I wouldn't say at minimum, but likely within these next few weeks of price action, contingent upon the major validations that we're going to speak about yet again today, the same ones as before, but we actually have gotten a few more pieces of information. So with that in mind, I'm going to let's go to the market data tab right here. I do want to point towards this as well. The fear and greed index now coming off the extremely fearful reads, as you can see right here as I blow this one up. You can see that we've actually been in the extremely fearful zone for about 2 months now fully, which is starting to be a lot more comparable to what we saw over the summer on the $30,000 macro cycle lows thus far, where it's been about 2.5 to 3 months in this region. So we are starting to we're starting to mature within this region. And again, what's most likely coming out of a read like this alongside price action, alongside the other indicators that we've been looking at, probably going to see a relief rally in this case. The question is, does that relief rally do anything resembling a long-term macro reversal? That's the real question right now. I can't, obviously there's no way to absolutely know what the total answer is going to be, but we can mark off the areas for where that would be once again considered as confirmed. All right, so sweet. Let's come into the charts over here. And I want to follow up on the short-term time frame analysis first because we are starting to see a slew of higher lows on Bitcoin right here. We did say yesterday, short-term upside a little bit more likely than not, and that's kind of what we're getting right now. I still stick with what I've been saying in the context of the short and actually medium-term time frame range right here. That as long as Bitcoin's above about 34,500, I do look at this as more likely as a bottoming area than not. We are starting to see a lot of volume being done at the lows right here. We are starting to see some good signs that Bitcoin is going to try try for a bit of a rally. Problem is, any rally that fails to get even above $44,000, not even above, I mean, that's, it's quite far away right now, to be fair. I mean, for what it's worth, let's see, from current price action to all the way up there is about 20%. In fact, Bitcoin is still going to be working on lower highs, obviously, so the trend does remain. So understand that. Understand very, very clearly here that as long as Bitcoin is operating on lower lows and lower highs on the daily especially, it has not been a very profitable endeavor to be holding, especially long-term longs, let alone medium-term longs in this market. But for right now, it does look like we're going to have a nice try off the lows. And the question is, if you are looking for a trend continuation, where does the next lower high very likely come in around, or where does a reversal start to get confirmed as well? So a couple of major areas of interest right here, which we'll actually document in the short-term timeframes first, namely the 4-hour. The same resolution I'd be looking for to allow for or open up the road, let's say, for that move into the shallow $40,000 territory, play out, a 10 to 15% move to the upside here off the current lows, would be verified with any sort of a 4-hour closure. Even an hourly probably does it as well, a little bit above $39,000 in this case, 39,300 on an hourly, or on a 4-hour anywhere above about pretty much the same number anyways. If we go over here to a daily, could we use something a little bit more pertinent? Yep, although basically $39,000 would do it for me on a daily for at least a move, at least a try somewhere around $40,000 territory. On the daily right here, we do see daily Jewel is starting to actually get a bit more momentum to the upside, which is good. However, I do want to balance out that statement by saying that this is still a corrective move as defined by the BBWP, with BBWP coming down off of extremes right here, which we got all the way up to a 90 percentile, and the Jewel light also pointed up right now. That is not necessarily that's not a picture perfect signal. You want to see BBWP very, very low like we saw over here, and that was leading into a downside signal, as you can see, which did produce a pretty fucking nasty move actually. From signal given to next major low was 25% right there. Not bad, if I do say so myself. So again, first and foremost, this is technically a continuation move most likely, but Bitcoin can trade up quite significantly here. So, or at least significantly enough to talk about, I suppose. Anyways, okay, so where was I going to go with the next point? Yes, back into the short-term timeframes over here. Do we see anything else of particular interest right now? We do see that Bitcoin is starting to regain the 55. I don't really think that this is, this is not really a signal nor a non-signal just yet, but you typically see this sort of price action when you are within the midst of a bit of a short-term reversal. And of course, these higher lows right here coming off of the 33,500 region right here. And then of course our 35.7, and then more recently our 36,350, probably more likely to try for some upside here than not. But just be aware, the most important region, again, for the short and medium term timeframes, which can obviously bleed into the daily as well, is about 39,300 above there. I do look for Bitcoin to rally somewhere around $41,000 to $43,000. You'll notice that number is actually still significantly, I wouldn't say significantly, but certainly less than our last lower high at about $44,000. And there's a reason for that, because, well, I don't want to call a higher high before we actually do see a little bit more structure being built up on this next move. But here's the thing, and let me pull back a little bit more and bring into the view, as I'm going to get rid of my moving averages right there, a Fibonacci retracement from the high to the low of this whole formation, the whole macro formation right here, that is. And you will notice that the 382 is right around the $40,000 level. So above there, I should actually, especially if we get a daily closure, any sort of a, even a 12-hour closure would probably do it as well, very likely do get a move officially back up to the 0.5. That is a high probability play. Problem is that coming off of a low like this, when we do still have a daily downtrend, and by the way, the weekly is a bit in the mix of reversal here as well, as we do have our first lower low. We do actually have our first lower low on the weekly since basically, a couple years ago, actually. And well, what comes after a lower low if things do reverse? A lower high. So do have to be on lower high watch for the weekly here specifically, because a macro reversal on a weekly very likely does get the macro, direction of Bitcoin, because all macro reversals on the weekly, all weekly reversals have been the macro direction, that is. So when going back into it over here, this is your kind of classic not bear trappy, but bull trappy region right here, off of some shorts taking profit, shorts covering, whatever the fuck you want to call it over here. Realistically, most shorts are probably going to be, if they are reasonable people, taking profits after a pretty nasty downtrend, pretty much all the way down to your macro lows right now. Your like yearly lows in this case. So very, very likely to be taking profit right there. And then if they want, they can of course short yet again, very likely between the 0.5 6.5 and the 618. So I would take this still one step at a time. The next major region on the short term is about 39,300 on a 4-hour closure. Above there, I do look for Bitcoin to very likely beget a continuation move up above, somewhere around about $41,000 to $42,000. That, if it leads into a daily closure, specifically above $40,000 right here, the 382, I would extend that move over time. This is all not going to happen in a straight line, by the way. Like, it's probably going to be a lot of ebbs and flows, but perhaps in the in the next few weeks, then I would be looking for a continuation move somewhere between $44,000 and about $48,000. Here's the thing though, if you are going to be macro bearish and you are looking for that weekly lower high, you would expect weakness anywhere between these two numbers right here. Again, 44 and 48. If you see that, and then specifically Bitcoin come back down even on a daily and close below about $40,000, the 382 right here, that's gonna be a really, really good indication that this asset is going to play out the macro bearishness. We very likely see a range at best between low 40s and 30s for months and months and months, and potentially, in my opinion, the worst case scenario somewhere down around about $25,000. But again, that's so far away. I don't think that it's reasonable to or relevant to talk about right now. And the invalidation, or it's not even the problem is that the short-term move hasn't even been validated to begin with right here. But I would say that this setup would obviously be more on the bearish side and likely to trade back down to the 30 to 30, or basically the $30,000 base if Bitcoin starts to close even 4-hour dildos below about 34,500 dailies, especially, but 4 hours probably gets it in this case as well. So here's the thing. If you are looking for the macro reversal and you are Boolah-ish here, then what you're probably wanting to see, or what you're probably going to expect to see, is some move like this still, and then come down here and set in a higher low anywhere above about $40,000 would be fair game. And then your confirmation of full-on Boolahs is, back above on a daily closing basis. This is not our last, but a few lower highs ago back in late December at about $52,000. If you see something like that, that would look really, really good. We can start talking about plan B targets, or maybe not even plan B targets, but at least prior highs again, something like that. And that would look very, very good for the long term, obviously. Anyways, I want to bring you over here to some of the other signals that we did confirm as of yesterday. Yesterday's closure for CME for both the daily and the weekly. The daily stochastic momentum will be remaining to the upside as long as we are above 35,550. So that is obviously going to be good coming into the beginning of this next week. But remember, CME is not trading over the weekend. All sorts of weird shit happens over the weekend. So I really don't have a strong opinion over the weekend, to be quite frank with you. Of course, it should also be known that lower term time frame momentum oscillators are also trending right now as well to the upside, and actually going vertical right here too on the 4 hour, showing 36,675, and the hourly is doing what? Is actually up as well, above 37,500. Both of these were closed above, of course, on Friday at closure. So with that in mind, if I go over here to the 5-day or the weekly, we have seen stochastic momentum essentially correct all the way back down to, or I wouldn't say correct, but come all the way back down to, general major lows in this case. The last time we saw it around this region was July. The time before that we saw it around this region was October 2019. This one was, not a macro reversal. It was a nice move to the upside, yes, but this one did lead into a continuation move to the downside. So this is not, like a all is well and good in this world signal right here, although we will follow up on a couple that do have that potential. And then of course the other one is actually your macro cycle low of 2018 December at 3,100, and the time before that was another failed signal, although a little bit too early to really be judging this one in July 2018, but still a nice move to the upside, which did get undone on me, over the next month or so. Anyways, that will naturally be coming down to open up this next week. And here's the thing, we already do have spot price action over here showing a few of the other interesting things as well. In this case, I want to go to the 5-day because this is going to be closing not tonight, but tomorrow night alongside the weekly at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And why is this important right here? We're going to see the 5-day have a chance to cross the upside for the first time basically since, summer, which was that pretty nice run, if you do remember that, from about $30,000 base to $69,000 current all-time high. This will officially happen, and this is kind of the big signal that I'm really looking at right now. With any sort of a closure above 35,620 right there. And if I put on a nice green horizontal line, you'll notice that Bitcoin's really only come down to this level a few times in its 12 to 13 year history, of which we have 1, 2, 3, 4 on the board right there. The last time that we saw it come down to this region was actually December 2018. So that was your last macro cycle low. The time before that was actually your macro cycle low from January 2015 right here. The time before that was actually just a few months prior to that in October 2014. It was a failed rally, but did beget a nice move here from wick to wick, a pretty phenomenal move actually, 73% from closure to closure, about a just under 20% move right there as well. So, that's kind of the more bearish view on this. I think that this is very reasonable to prepare for, especially if Bitcoin, does put a nice rally from here and then again comes back down below $40,000. So we're getting way ahead of ourselves to begin with, or I'm getting way ahead of myself to begin with. But, you can kind of see over this next month or two that if you see something like that, probably going to get another major continuation move to the downside. And again, I do think that max pain to the downside is probably like $25,000. And then the time before that actually is another macro cycle low from October 2011. Anyways, fair enough. I'm just reading this. I'm just reading this conversation in the Discord. It's a really good conversation in the Discord. It's really good to see. People probably think that like we haze new people in the Discord because they always ask, they always ask intuitive questions, but it's difficult to kind of deal with. But it's good to see that the people who were newer before now come in and they're like, hey man, this is not really a wise way to do things because I've tried that before and I've got wrecked. So usually it just comes down to, hey man, you should probably backtest whatever fucking strategy that you're considering using, because if you haven't done that, you ain't got no strategy, and your real strategy is to get wrecked over a long period of time. Might work out a few times here and there. By the way, I should denote that the 2-day closure did actually initiate the conditions for stochastic momentum once again cross into the upside. This is consistent as long as Bitcoin is trading above 34,550, the same area that I'd essentially looked to validate another test back down to $30,000 base first before anything else, and then come back to things after there. I mean, maybe even Bitcoin breaks down fully to 25 from there. However, at least I'd be looking for a move somewhere down around about $29,000 to $30,000 base or so. And then the daily, just like CME, is both up as well. I'm curious actually to see what the lower term time frames are looking like right here, like a 4 hour. Yeah, it is vertical right now above 36,500. So, maybe we do see a nice gap up over the weekend. But as I always say, I'm not a humongous fan of weekend price action. It's usually just a waste of time, to be quite honest with you. Anyways, let's go back on over here. We are 16 minutes into this bitch. Should I represent the bearish side a little bit better? Yeah, I should actually, because there are several things to be aware of right here. I think this chart kind of summarizes it as best as possible in the most simplistic way. Yes, there's a million other things to be looking at as well. Yes, I could make a much more stronger bearish case long term, but short term, do I think that Bitcoin trades sideways and up outside of this range, tries for at least another lower high, and then perhaps dumps back down? Probably, I think that's a little more likely. But yeah, it should be known that coming into the end of the month here, which we only got realistically just one more day of real trading left, that's going to be Monday. Obviously, Saturday and Sunday do count, but it's usually kind of a nothing burger, as the saying goes. But we will see monthly MACD cross to the downside, actually, with any sort of a closure below about 40,750. Similar to that, it also should be known that the monthly stochastic momentum will cross the downside with any sort of a closure below 53,500 as well. So do be aware of that, because that hasn't necessarily been the best indication long term. We did see this, or the last time we saw this also lose the bullish control zone simultaneously while crossing down was back when over here. That was February 2018, not a bullish time. And the time before that, and actually a very similar predicament right here, after coming off of extremes, coming back down and then rejecting it exactly at the bullish control zone. This was January 2014, leading into the bull trap before going down another like 50 or 60%. So do be aware of that. And then of course, it's not just that, but we've only seen monthly MACD cross the downside, 3 times in Bitcoin's history. They've all been pretty devastating, actually. And to round that out, we've also seen the PMAR over here lose the white 20 simple moving average on this chart only a few times in history as well, both the upside and the downside, both of which have been very powerful to the upside and the downside. But right now, or not right now, but actually as of last month, officially in December open, we did see it cross the downside of that. And these, accompanied by that MACD signal, have always led towards first a test towards the white 20 simple on the chart right here, which is exactly where we're at right now, by the way. This right here, this right here, and this right here. And then a few bounces around there, kind of just ditter-dottering around, if that's even a word. And then eventually over the next 3 to 6 months, breaking down for a nice move down to the green 55 exponential average, which is currently trading just under $22,500. That'll obviously naturally rise up over time. So the longer that Bitcoin goes sideways here, the more and more that this will naturally come up. And again, I would still keep an open mind for both bullish and bearish resolutions. Just be aware of where the long-term macro picture changes. At least that would be my validation and invalidation for those setups for the very long term. Until then, short term, I think is, I still think is a little bit more likely to go to the upside here than the downside. So fair enough. All right. I think that is a good place to leave with this one off. A nice and short and sweet video, just 20 minutes long. Whoops, a little bit too long. I'm going to wish you well. Take care and see you hopefully very soon.